So startups typically have had one product and it's life or death.
Put together a business plan. What's your problem? What's your solution? What are your health economics? How much is it going to cost? How many resources do I need? And as my 10-year-old would say, let them cook.
Let them cook. It is an opportunity. It is not the opportunity, right?
You've already got the Matthew McConaughey green light. It just opens yourself up to look for those green lights in your life.
It's like I want to go stay in the in-laws mansion, but I don't want them to be there. You know what I mean? Like I want to take the good, leave the bad. So what does DCMS stand for?
So it stands for...
Hey everyone, welcome to the Medtech Innovation Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Jones, founder at Medtech, where we bring you ideas and trends to help you win in medtech. Our guest today, someone I'm glad to call a friend, is Brad Shirley. Brad's an engineer that's been in the space for 20 years. He's navigated the concept to commercialization maze with over a dozen medtech devices and led innovation-focused teams at the product, program, and business level. Brad, welcome to the pod. Where do we find you today?
Thank you, Spencer. I am glad to be here. I am in the outskirts of Atlanta, Georgia. A cold and rainy day here today.
Nice. Yeah, I'm in Fayetteville. We've got a nice bright day. It's a little chilly here, but better than the rain, I guess. So let's just go ahead and jump right in. You know, you spent some time at Cook and then Cook Regentec, you know, which we'll get into here in a bit. But like, I've always found it interesting, especially with your role at Cook Regentec, kind of innovation in a corporate environment versus a startup environment. So I'm curious to hear, you know, it's like, for instance, your time at Cook, working in R&D. I'm curious to hear where the innovation is coming from and like what's the mix of new internally developed products, like second or third generations or iterations of products, collaborative IP with docs, like where was it the innovation coming from? Kind of what was the mix there?
Yeah, so, you know, I can't speak to today at Cook, but at least back, 10, 15 years ago, I think a lot of the ideas are still coming from the physicians and from the docs. That relationship has to be strong. They're still the ones seeing the patients every day and solving the problems. So I think that's where a lot of it comes from. I think, again, those physicians, just collaborating with them because they're on the front lines of everything. But I think one of the coolest things I saw is sort of two pathways. One is, physicians will have an idea. You go out, you talk to a physician, and you may tweak it a little bit. It may be spot on. You may start a relationship where you're developing something over the months or years. But the really cool thing I would see at Cook, a couple of my leaders and mentors, is those engineers or those product managers that could go in and listen to a problem that a physician had. And the physician may not have an idea. They just may have a problem. Here's a problem I encounter every day. I can't solve it. I don't have the device to do it. And watching those people be able to come back inside the walls of Cook and pull from different business units and spit out a solution was really, really great. So I was lucky to be around a lot of those people.
Yeah, that's awesome. One thing I'm interested about, and I feel like when you're at a large company, you get the chance to do this, but when you have products and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, like I just talked to one of the sales guys or something, and like there's some docs using this off label, and having that be kind of a catalyst for innovating to like better serve that market with an on-label use. But like, I'd say broader question here, like when you're at a large company, you guys have a lot of products, like, how frequently are you seeing off-label use? Like, how is that handled from kind of like, the engineering team that hears it from salespeople and then they're like, when do we loop in quality? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So, I've got some direct experience with that. So I moved from engineering into product management, 6, 7 years into my career. And the very first thing I got thrust into was physicians all over the world using traditional Cook medical devices for very non-traditional cell therapy delivery procedures. And, Cook had great reps in the field, but you don't want your reps talking about a lot of off-label things for obvious reasons. So I got to go travel the world, which is really awesome, and just find out what all these docs were doing. And, they were pulling devices off the shelf because they were there. It was the best thing they had. And so we were really at the forefront of that. It was really exciting to get in there and find out, why did you choose this catheter? Why did you choose this needle? And how can we make it better? So that was a really rewarding part of my career.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, something we talked about, when we were prepping the other week, how much things have changed just like with like on the quality piece specifically. And you mentioned that I was asking like, what was innovation like at a large company? And one of the things you talked about was having to hire a document bloodhound, a quality document bloodhound. Share more about that.
Yeah, so before we moved from bigger Cook Medical into the Cook Regentec incubator accelerator era, I'll call it, we were developing those products I just spoke about inside bigger Cook, and they didn't fit an existing business unit. They were way too early for people to really focus on and really care about. And I don't say that in a really bad way. It's just it's really early. So they needed time to incubate and figure out where they fit. I mean, at that time, we didn't even know if cell therapy was going to be a thing, right? So it was, you got to have that become a thing for your devices to become a thing. So we were developing those things internally and trying to have that real early innovation fit a bigger quality system that had been in existence forever with a company that's making, billions of dollars of revenue. And it was just a hard grind every day. So the latter sort of part before we moved to Regentec, I actually brought in a team member, and that is literally all he did. Had so many documents that had to be done, things that have to be done, right? You have to do your normal design control work. So yes, there were some things that probably didn't need to be done, but a lot of it had to be done. But the fact that so many people had to review it, so many people had to sign it, and people that weren't part of that core team, I had to have someone that walked around that building all day and just said, hey, I'm here, I'm a pest, can you look at this? What is this project? Can I answer any questions for you? Can I get it signed tomorrow instead of 3 weeks from now? It's just, you just got to be creative to kind of get through that innovation struggle at times.
Yeah, that's so true. Obviously, one thing to kind of remove that blocker, if you will, and I don't come from the big corporate management world. I just hear that term blocker get thrown around. I think it's interesting. But one way to remove those types of blockers is, EQMS systems, which shout out to, Viva and Rook with their quick start and the quick vault. So quick shout out there. I do think it's interesting. I feel like Medtech, as just wildly advanced as the technology is, right? Whether it's catheter based stuff or gene cell therapy, all of that, it blows my mind that it seems that medtech companies and medtech, operators are very, averse, and they're not adopting kind of more progressive platforms and technologies. And I think a proof point for that is just, I think I saw somewhere where it was around 50 to 60% of people are on, EQMS systems, and the rest are still paper-based. And paper-based today, right, is more spreadsheets, Word docs, DocuSign, Dropbox, that kind of thing. But it's still just kind of staggering that you can have a company that's doing robotic surgery or whatever, and they're still just tossing around, Word docs, PDFs, when all of these electronic, EQMS solutions exist. I know you still got friends at Cook and some other places, but have you seen the adoption of those types of EQMSs at the larger companies?
Yeah, no, I think it has. It was just a little bit slower, right? It's really hard to change when you've been in business for a long time and you've got systems and processes and paper, and you've just got lots of people. So it just takes an effort. Yeah. It just takes leadership, really making that a priority and focus. But yeah, I definitely seeing that at the larger.
Yeah. One small point, and I'll get to another question, but I was talking to, I'll call them kind of a unique, kind of development group that works really a lot of the times hand in glove with strategics. And one of the ways that they try to make the things that they're working on more valuable and more kind of immediately adoptable by that large strategic is they literally, got clones of that large strategic's quality system. And so when they were building something that they knew they wanted to hand off to that big strategic, they were kind of building it in a clone of their quality system. So it was just immediate kind of port in with all the right nomenclature and all the right SOPs and all of that stuff. I'm trying to think what would the risk be for more large strategics to kind of have that mindset of hey, if we find a company and we like what they're working on, maybe we can just tell them, give them a little miniature clone and recommendations there. I don't know. It was an interesting angle because it really could take 6 months or more to get everything from someone else's quality system ported over to yours. I don't know if you guys ever dealt with that type of situation.
I haven't dealt with it directly, but I've got some colleagues who have, and I've seen it take way more than 6 months. You see some of these big acquisitions of very established companies, and bigger companies are taking medium-sized companies, and they're making it look like their product, and they're pulling it into their systems, and that can take a year or two or even more.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think early on, if you have that opportunity to kind of bring things together quicker, it can certainly help. Yeah.
How about that as a tool? Somebody build an AI tool that's almost like an API for two quality systems where you can just immediately transfer everything over and it kind of cross-links it. But anyways, so Cook Regentec, until we really kind of dove deep on this when we were doing some prep, I really wasn't 100% sure or didn't really understand kind of the dynamic there. But Cook Regentec is essentially an innovation incubator underneath Cook, parent company, if you will. So how did that come to be? What was it like working for that spin out?
Yeah, so Cook Regentec, again, that was one of the more enjoyable eras of my career. Unfortunately, it no longer exists, but it was a really great run. And I think that the answer is really twofold. I think one, at that time, Cook was looking to move into the regenerative medicine space. So there was an acquisition of a cell manufacturing company. There was some cell therapy vet work going on. And then, twofold. So me personally, I was working on those devices related to delivering cell and gene therapies and having those struggles of trying to get these products products through the big system that didn't really fit the system. And so we're lucky enough to have a couple of really good leaders and mentors that helped convince Cook to let us spin out some really awesome people and essentially start our own company underneath the umbrella of Cook Medical. And the idea was to take all the advantages of Cook, so the name, the reputation, obviously they were our funder, they were our primary investor, our only investor. So take all of those really advantageous things and then kind of step away from the things that were holding us back. So we built our own quality system so we could keep everything in-house. We brought our own team over that was really focused on what we were doing. And the entire idea was to essentially develop the regenerative medicine focused products that Cook would want to acquire, and that they were earlier in the process, so we weren't distracting the larger Cook Medical from their overall goals. We were still pushing things forward. And then ultimately the idea was to get these things cleared, get some really early market traction. I mean, just a handful of customers, get things going, and then make a decision. Let's spin it back into Cook if it fits, or let's spin it out, and then let's get the team working on the next thing again. So that was really the sort of history and genesis of Regentec.
God, that sounds so fun, honestly, to be able to do that. So what are some things that worked well, and I know you said it's not around anymore, but just like, if you were like advising a large kind of comparable company to Cook on whether or not to do this, what worked well and what didn't, kind of what would you say?
Yeah, so what worked well for us, we launched products. So products were launched. I mean, there were a couple years there when we were on the same level as far as number of products launched. Now, obviously, Cook would launch products and have way bigger revenue than we ever did. We were able to get products out just because we had that small focus team. And, I didn't have to hire a guy to go run around the Cook Regentec building. We were all in the same hallway. It was really, really easy.
Yeah.
So I think that process worked really well. In hindsight, what we could have done better, I wouldn't say difficult. It's an interesting relationship to manage, right? Because you're trying to take the advantages of Cook, but you're also trying to get away from, or the parent company, or you're trying to get away from the things that are slowing you down. And so that can cause some negative feelings at times, I think. But
it's like I want to go stay in the in-laws mansion, but I don't want them to be there. You know what I mean? Like I want to take the good, leave the bad.
Really great analogy. So I think, overall, you still just want those connections, right? You want the support. I still love having the connections to a global sales and distribution network. So I didn't have to go out and fight for my connections. I still knew that. So you still had to keep that. We probably could have done a little bit better just keeping that relationship tight so that people understood what we were doing a little bit more. And then when we got products that were ready to go back in, Cook wasn't like, hey, what is this? This came out of left field. Like, we're not really ready for this. We could have done a lot better prepping that, I think.
So something that I don't know that I fully appreciated until I was like working on an R&D team. I feel like R&D budgets are like some of the first things to get cut whenever you're going through a tough time. It has nothing to do with R&D, just stuff going on in the company, markets, whatever, is going through a tough time. Is that something that you saw at Cook or Cook Regentec? Like, I'm just curious if that's an experience that you've had.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the thing is, unlike other functions, but, R&D costs money, especially if you're on the early sort of frontline innovations, it can cost a lot of money. I mean, so there's really no way around that. But I think the most important thing, in the Regentec world when I was there, and, even in my Maruho stint with the sports medicine startup, is just really be good stewards of the capital. It's like having one big investor, right? Both of those situations had a parent company that was funding us, wanted us to go from A to B, and just being good stewards of the capital, I think. And then if you build up your trust during those good years where you're being good stewards of the capital, then hopefully that can shield you a little bit when those tough times come, because it just happens. There's business inflections up and down. I think there's just specific examples in Regentec worlds. That was the first time I got, almost full control of the budget. Like it was my responsibility. I wouldn't say control, but it was my responsibility. I was looking at that every month, every quarter, sitting down with my boss going, how much are we spending? And most of what we were doing was all R&D. So looking at that, I think, we still had the advantages of bigger Cook, right? So we were under the Cook Medical travel policy, which was extremely generous then. I don't know what it is now.
That's awesome.
Extremely generous then. So if you took an international trip, you could fly business if you wanted to, which is really, really nice and not inexpensive. But once I got control of that budget, all of a sudden, it's like, hey, do I want to spend $4,000 on this flight, or do I want to spend $800 on this flight? And, funny story, a lot of those times those trips get scheduled at the last minute. You can't plan these trips out 3-4 months ahead of time. It's when the doc's available or when your collaborator is available. And about 2 weeks ahead of time, I got a chance to go to Italy to spend 3 days with a potential partner in the cell therapy space, and ended up taking my wife with me, which was really great. And I flew coach over. One, because the flight was incredibly expensive, and two, because I'm not going to sit in business or premium economy and leave my wife in economy.
Yeah.
So there's some personal and some professional things there. But when I booked that flight through the travel agency, I actually booked it myself. I got a call from the travel agent saying, you can fly business if you want, right? But that's really how it was.
Yeah.
Again, it saved me money, and I got to redirect that money elsewhere. So again, just being good stewards of the capital can be really helpful.
Yeah.
Those downswings.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, I don't know if you ever had to have this conversation. I feel like a lot of people in R&D have, though. When it comes down from, powers that be on high, like, hey, we need to, kill 40% of the projects, right? Or cut this budget significantly. Like, I've been in that position of having to try to really explain to them hey, look, I know that we're going through tough times now, or, it doesn't seem like we need to be spending money on this, but let me protect this 75%, because if we don't do this, we're going to be 18 months from now or 2 years from now trying to figure out why we can't grow top line, or why we're not competing and why we're falling behind. Because if we stop innovating now, it's going to feel good to the budget in the short term, but it's a long-term risk.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's just where you have to have the open line of communication with your leadership. And it takes strong leadership to understand, R&D does cost money, and yes, R&D should put in their effort, right? If we need to cut back, that's why you also have to have, if you're good stewards of the capital, you've got your business plans squared away, you understand the value prop for this product and what it can bring to the company. That's when you've got to spit it out and say, look, if you want to cut this 20%, fine, but this needs to stay for all the reasons.
Yeah, no, for sure. So talking about being good stewards of capital, I'm curious to get your thought process on this, because I think I've evolved, over time to a degree. But when you're thinking about, there's a project that you have, let's just say it's a product and there's some complexities to it, right? There's kind of, I'll call it, maybe there's part A and there's part B and there's part C, and they all come together to form this either platform or instrument or whatever it is. How do you think about, attacking and prototyping, whether it's sub-assemblies? Do you try to make the whole thing? Do you try to sprint towards an MVP? Do you really break it down and say, we're only going to prototype sub-assemblies till each one works? And I'm just curious your kind of thought process for both risk mitigation on product development, but then also being a good steward of capital.
Yeah, I think there's always a main part of every device, right?
Yeah.
You got to get that main thing working. And if you waste time on, getting a color right or getting a catheter curve just perfect, a catheter curve could be the main thing. It just depends on the product. But yeah, trying to figure out what is that main feature, those main 1, 2, or 3 features that are critical, and focusing there. Again, that's just being a good steward of the capital. It's setting yourself up.
Yeah, I agree. If you take that approach, so much of everything else, that one most important, value proposition driver, right? All the features are important, but there are usually a handful, like you said, that drive that main purpose, that main function, that main value proposition of the device. And if you really lean into we're going to figure out this and kind of freeze it in a way, and then you just start building around off of that, right? Because everything has to flex and kind of give and be shaped around the design constraints that are needed for that primary feature. I've seen that kind of take shape with a number of products, and you're like, man, why did we waste time doing this other stuff? Because it's all impacted by the only thing that matters, which is this feature and this function, and now we got to change it. So,
you're just speaking to focus. There's focus on a project level, and there's focus within a project as well. So finding out what is the most important thing to focus on within a project, especially in the sort of research or early development phase, is critical.
Yeah, I love coupons too. Building a coupon where it's completely low fidelity on everything except for the really tiny only thing that matters, because they're cheaper to make, faster to make. You figure that out, you just keep moving. Because what you don't want to have happen is we built this whole thing, but there's an axle that we didn't quite get right. And so the whole rest of it and the housing around the axle and then the components, that's part of a monolithic piece, right? All of it's wasted. So you're like, okay, now we got to machine or make this whole entire thing. Versus if you would have just said, hey guys, we need to figure out this axle and this swedge right here, because if we don't figure out that axle and the swedge and the cavity that goes in, everything else is going to get mected and we're going to waste all this money. You know what I mean? So startups typically, most all the startups that I've been a part of, right, have had one product and it's life or death, right? You're kind of putting it all on black and you just got to move forward with that. But when you're managing multiple projects, underneath a larger budget, there had to probably be projects where you're, having to kill one and double down on more promising ones or things like that. So how did you and your team, talking about focus within a project and everything, right? How did you allocate energy? How did you allocate focus? Just your thought process on that.
Yeah, so I think focus is huge. Sometimes it's easy. So I think, a Maruho example, literally the very first day on the job, I find out I've got all these interesting projects. I have 2 engineers. I'm leading R&D. The first day, first meeting I'm sitting in, our Tyvek pouch is expiring in the next 3 months. And the notifications the previous 12 months from the supplier weren't received for one reason or the other inside the organization. So at that point, I'm literally on my first shot, like, hey, these really cool, innovative things you've got, we have 60 days to fix this, because we weren't making a lot of revenue, but that revenue was important, and you can't ship a product without a Tyvek pouch. Really critical part of your
It's
product.
pretty important.
So that's really an easy example. No one likes it, but everyone gets it. You got to spend 2 months fixing this. Other times, if you fast forward, later, a year or two down the road, when everything was stabilized at Maruho, and all of a sudden we had 4 or 5 really cool, innovative type of ideas. And that's when, I'm not a huge process guy, but I recognize that processes are necessary. I like flexibility in processes. I like people to have flexibility within them. I have a process for taking those projects, and it's not unlike what you do in a startup world when you're trying to go raise capital or raise money. Put together a business plan. I have a template for it. We didn't call it a pitch deck. We called it a define deck or a business plan deck. But it had the same elements. What's your problem? What's your solution? What are your health economics? How much is it going to cost? How many resources do I need? All those things, the same elements, and forcing sort of your R&D and your product management to come together and pull that together and present it to leadership and go, hey, here goes our 4 or 5 things. What do we want to do? That gets everyone on the same page. And then where I sort of divert from that is a lot of times bigger companies will then really grip down on the process after that. What I like to do is put a team together, smart people, driven people, give them focus, give them autonomy, give them empowerment, and as my 10-year-old would say, let them cook. Let them go.
Let them cook.
You've already got the Matthew McConaughey green light. Let them go. Let them get the project out. Let them get it done. Let them hit the roadblocks. But yeah, you're still checking in. You're still part of it as a member of leadership, but you're not hovering. And, I think that's kind of my approach. That's small companies, that's startups, that's large companies, but you've got to get everyone on the same page up front from a business level so that you can let those teams drive forward and get that innovative product out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I can imagine too, like whenever you do have to pull the plug, pull the rug, however you want to say it, it's got to be a tough conversation with kind of the primary project manager, right? If you're managing a team of project managers, that's got to be a tough conversation. I mean, I've kind of been on the receiving end of that in a way, right? Of just being like, hey, we're going to have to cut this budget, or I guess mine were always like budget cuts, more less so just fully winding the project down.
Yeah. But the process helps both ways, right? So if you choose that project, everyone understands why. If you don't choose it, now everyone understands why. So if your project is going, I've had engineers tell me, thank you for that process, because now I'm not working on something for the next 9 months that nobody really wants and it's not going to make a big impact. So it helps with both, the go and the no-go decisions.
Yeah, that's very true. Like having a well-defined process with objective go, no-go thresholds and benchmarks, right, is going to help provide clarity to everybody throughout the project, like up, down, for those go and no-go decisions. That's really nice. So something, I beat on this drum all the time. I know you've already alluded to it, and we talked about this in our prep, but customer discovery has got to be a bit easier at a large company, I think, with the network of KOLs, you got sales reps in the field, and the name behind it, right? Whenever you're reaching out to somebody for a customer discovery request. I'm always curious, at a big company like Cook or even Cook Regentec, others, how did you guys approach that customer discovery process?
Yeah, so, similar to how other people would do it in a startup environment too, but there's certain advantages, right? If when I had Cook Medical on my email or on my business card, 9 times out of 10, a surgeon was calling me back because, the reputation was there. And even in Cook Regentec, we were still part of the Cook family, so people would still call us back, even though they didn't know who we were. They're like, what do you mean, an incubator, accelerator? What is Regentec? They would still call back because Cook was in the name. And then it was great. Again, I alluded to this earlier, the global network of sales reps and distributors where there weren't direct sales reps that were extremely helpful, and being able to interact with them. And, many times I was working on early things, and you'd see a doc who'd write an awesome paper about something that not a lot of people knew what they were doing. It was really early. If there's someone in Atlanta, for instance, and you'd call up that Atlanta rep and say, hey, do you know Doc Smith? I'd say, yeah, I know him. Like, here's a paper I saw from him. We'd like to speak to him. What do you think? And the really good reps would then engage with us and go, okay, well, what are you doing? Let me have a little bit of knowledge here so I can help facilitate that relationship. And then at the end of that, everyone's getting value. My value is obvious. I'm getting feedback from a potential customer on a project. The rep is showing value because they're bringing someone in from corporate and showing that, hey, I'm not just trying to sell you something today. I'm trying to provide value to you and help you solve a problem. And then, the Doc Smith on the other end is like, hey, yeah, this is great. They're coming in. They're trying to help me solve a problem. Everyone gets value out of the transaction.
Yeah.
So that was really good. And then on the, I can speak to sort of the smaller startup side, on the Maruho side, we were less than 50 employees. So luckily we had some leaders with some really great networks that help. You've got to use that network a little bit more. And then on your smaller startups, like right now, surgeon-led startups, me and, a couple of advisors, and no one knows us, right? So you've got to take your opportunity. So there may be a little cold calling. You still use your network. We've all got networks, but you may get that 5 minutes to go, hey, doc, you don't know me. You don't know this company. Here's what we're doing. Here's our technology. Try to quickly, sort of in an elevator pitch, build some trust and get to that next meeting so then you can develop a relationship with them. So it's definitely a little bit easier on the larger company side.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't know if I've seen it, and if this exists, I would love for someone to like DM me, anybody listening in the audience to just DM me and make me aware of this. But like, I feel like you could have like especially if the company's large enough, like a head of customer discovery, you know what I mean? Like as a position, and all they do is just like, sift through, meet with people like engineers, sales reps. They're kind of consolidating a lot of this like user feedback, right? As well as like having one-on-ones with surgeons and kind of being like a marketing position, right? Like almost like a marketing intel, but like specifically targeted customer discovery. That'd be interesting. So you're so right about that name being important, but I think there are ways around that, especially for small companies. Like something that I've seen be successful. We did this at Lapivations. We didn't have a huge name, but we really wanted to do customer discovery on this new product concept that we were potentially, we were thinking about doing a transaction on. And I was like, you know what? I've got a list of emails from all these conferences, whatever. So I just put together just a tight list or a tight email that I sent out to, I think like I started in kind of waves, but I did like a wave of 50 to start or 40 or something like that. And I basically said, hey, here's who I am. We're evaluating a new product. Here's a brief description on what it is. And here's a one pager. Yeah. And then I said, all I'm looking for is 15 minutes of your time to ask you questions about your workflow and blah, blah, blah. This is not a sales pitch. I think we ended up doing $50 or maybe it was $25, but we just said like $25 Starbucks gift card for your time. Send it to you as soon as the thing's over. Here's a calendar link. Book it at your convenience. And like, honestly, I think I ended up getting like a dozen interviews out of that because it was just like simple, easy. Oh, okay. Like this makes sense. There wasn't a whole lot of like, rigmarole on scheduling and it wasn't like, a huge time commitment. Yeah. So anyways, everybody likes Starbucks. Everybody in healthcare drinks coffee, it seems like. So that was just something that I found. And like, dollar for dollar, you're like, oh, that may have cost $300 or whatever. But like, how valuable was that $300, right?
That's extreme value. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So you've been touching on, a little bit. One of my favorite titles or positions, product manager. So a lot of people that I talk to, they'll reach out to me and be like, hey, I want to get into medical sales, and I always tell them to look into the product manager positions, right? Associate product manager, product manager. It's just a super versatile position. And I think it can take many shapes, right? And, they'll have different responsibilities depending on the company that they're at. I know you started in engineering prior to being a product manager, but like, what was that like? Take us through that journey and then just kind of like, would love to get your thoughts on product manager as a position and like for somebody looking to get into medical sales.
I'd love the product manager role. It was great for me. So, after, 6-7 years, I transitioned from R&D into product management. A lot of what I did in my later direct R&D times was sort of product management like anyway. I was kind of leading some R&D programs and working cross-functionally with people. But yeah, making that jump is what helped me open my eyes to the rest of the business. You can kind of get into an R&D hole a little bit at times. And, depending on the company and the culture, sometimes I like to keep R&D at arm's length. Like, come up with really cool stuff, but we got people to go do these things. But there's no way around not learning the business when you're a product manager. You are forced to learn cross-functional skills. You're working with everyone.
So like whenever I describe it, I'm like, usually it's technical, right? You have to have some technical understanding, but you're really sitting in between sales, marketing, and engineering. That's usually how I describe it. And you kind of have to have like a superpower in one direction. You know what I mean? Agree, disagree? How would you describe it?
No, I would. I called it the liaison, essentially, between the outside and the inside. And then also once you're inside, you're the liaison between all the different groups who are working on a product or a project. You're in the middle of it all. You need to know what's going on and you need to drive it from a product management perspective. Normally what I see is you have engineers that move into product management, or you have salespeople that move into product management. You can come from both directions, and both can do really great things. I've seen really great, successful product managers come from both of those backgrounds. Yeah, they have product knowledge coming from each way, whether it's a clinical field or whether it's from the R&D perspective.
Well, and also, I've seen some people, you look at their LinkedIn, and a couple I know personally, but then you'll see people's LinkedIn, and it's like, they'll have product manager as a position they were at, 10, 12 years ago, and then you see like a pretty significant ascent up the corporate corporate ladder or even at the different companies. But like, I feel like it's a position where you can learn so much. Like you said, learn about the business, pricing, strategy, market access, different markets and things like that. Like you can learn enough about the business that if you really lean in and do a great job, it has upward mobility. A lot of people really look for in positions, right?
100%. Yeah, definitely. It takes a little bit more on the R&D side. I'm seeing a lot more companies embrace this, but at certain times it's hard to progress in an R&D straight technical function. Now people are getting better with that. It's not just become a senior engineer. You can become leaders and managers and different things, but that product manager role is perfect for that.
Okay, so we've reached the end of the, I'll say, pre-scripted, if you will, if not at least pre-conceptualized topics that I wanted to ask you about. So now we have some that are off the beaten path a little bit. Some of these are going to be shorter, a little bit rapid fire. A good book recommendation. This can be sales, engineering, business leadership. What's a good book that you'd like to recommend to the audience?
Oh, a good book. I kind of already mentioned it a little bit earlier. Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights book is great. It is really good. I mean, you get his storytelling all intertwined within it, and it's an interesting upbringing and background he got, but it just opens yourself up to look for those green lights in your life. That's not Medtech specific. That's just career, or just growth, period. But really, really wonderful book.
Yeah, when you were saying that, it reminded me, a good friend of mine, Jordan Mickleby, we'll be talking about something. He'll say, it is an opportunity. It is not the opportunity, right? And I feel like when you're talking through that, it's like, is it a green light, right? Or is it not green? Is it yellow? Is it, you know what I mean? And you really want to look for those green lights. That's interesting. So next question, what does DCMS stand for?
So DCMS is my attempt at putting a little sense of humor into my business name. So it stands for Don't Call Me Shirley.
What movie is that from?
That is from the movie Airplane. Which is really old. Some of you younger audience members will have to go look it up. But a really famous scene where Leslie Nielsen's character, he's talking about flying. Can you fly and land this plane? And the guy says, Shirley, you're not serious. And he says, yes, I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
I'm serious, and don't call me Shirley.
Very, very simple way. I think early on when I started the business, it was just very quick. I didn't want to spend a lot of time. I wanted to get into the business and what I was going to do. Like, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time trying to figure out a name. I put solutions in the name because that's what I want to provide for clients, but let's just go with DCMS. And a joke I've heard probably 1 million times over the course of my lifetime. So that's
awesome. That's really cool. So last thing here I'll say is what is one thing about medtech or healthcare that just grinds your gears? I've got 1 million, I've got a laundry list. I'm going to keep those in the desk over here and not get those out. But I'm curious to hear from you. Is there anything about medtech or kind of the healthcare industry that just irks you to no end that you'd love to see change?
Oh, no, yeah, there's a lot of things. I mean, I'll kind of go back to why I started my business and why I've gotten frustrated over my years in medtech innovation is, if you look at R&D, you've got the research phase, which is very important. I love the strategy. I love trying to figure out what is the solution, what is the problem. But I'd like to get out of that phase as quickly as possible and get into the development phase. Why? Because that gets us closer to patients, gets us closer to the physicians and solving a problem. And I've seen a lot of really good stuff die on the vine because the execution failed. And whether it wasn't enough planning up front or not recognizing, okay, here's a roadblock that was just thrown at me, I didn't prepare for it, and it threw everybody off and everyone just quit. So that's probably the most frustrating thing I see in medtech. A lot of good technologies kind of die on the vine just from having some struggles during that execution phase. It is not easy in medtech innovation. There are things that are thrown at us left and right. It's a highly regulated environment. It should be treating patients, right? But you have to have some guts to make it through sometimes.
No, that's so true. And execution is 90% of it. You know what I mean? It really is. Sometimes you'll see companies on the market that are doing great and you're like, their stuff's not that innovative. It's because they executed, right? Kills me to no end whenever you'll be meeting, trying to do a mentor call or just meeting with someone for the first time. And they're like, yeah, I want you to sign an NDA first. It's just such a turnoff because it's dude, if you think I can steal your idea, I have the time, want to steal your idea. And even if I tried to, could beat you to the punch, get around your IP, all this stuff. But I think, it is a symptom of people thinking that it's all about the idea, right? And it's really not. It's about the team. It's about execution, right? It's about that team executing. Yeah. And I saw someone say this the other day. It was about valuing seed stage companies, right? It's basically the scarcity of the talent of the team, right? How valuable, how in demand. It's a demand statement for the team, basically. And it was an acknowledgement that execution is so important. But no, I couldn't agree more there. We're wrapping up the pod. Parting thoughts here. Anything you want to leave the audience with? with. It can be a question, a thought-provoking statement, something, plug anything you want. We'll put all of your contact info in the show notes, how to find you on LinkedIn, link to the DCMS website. But any parting thoughts for the audience here?
No, I think just connection-wise, at my LinkedIn personal page is where you can find me and things I'm talking about and things I'm thinking about. There is a DCMS Solutions LinkedIn page. Hope to get more active in 25. There's even a website, which is essentially a virtual business card now. So don't go there expecting to see anything exciting, but it's there. We hope in 25 to have a little bit more there. But yeah, no, thanks for having me. I always love talking about my experiences, and hopefully it helps other people, figure out what they need to do or where they want to go, or helps them solve a problem. Always love speaking of those things, so thank you for having me.
No, you bet, and I know you've helped a lot of people if they're listening in. Really appreciate it. Just want to plus one on what you said. Go follow Brad, guys. He's putting out some great content, and he really does know how to navigate this space. So if you are an early stage physician or clinician or innovator, or you're just looking for someone to really help drive forward your medtech innovation, you need to put Brad on the short list and give him a shout, because he's incredible at what he does. So for everyone that tuned in, thank you so much. All of our contact info and everything, like I said, is going to be in the show notes. But really appreciate you tuning in, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.